Good morning, colleagues. Thank you for attending and a warm welcome back to our PERCO SA Ponder virtual presentation series. We will commence with a short presentation lasting about 30 minutes, a question and answer session of 10 minutes, and conclude with a lucky prize draw for a Takealot voucher worth 1,000 rands. You are welcome to field questions in the chat box during the presentation, which will be answered at the end. Colleagues, please note that the webinar is being recorded and will be up on our PERCO SA website for those who are not able to join us right now and those who wish to revisit the presentations after for some insight. This morning will enlighten us on a trending topic, social media and the law the right way. In this Ponder webinar, we will find out what employees need to avoid posting online that may bring their employer's name into disrepute and the legal implications thereon, with some insights on recent case law and how both employers and employees can protect their interests. Our first guest speaker today, Lerato Ntwampe, is an admitted attorney of the High Court of South Africa, social media legal consultant, and cyber safety enthusiast. She holds a Bachelor of Commerce in Law as well as a Bachelor of Laws from the University of Pretoria in South Africa, where she specialized in information technology law and media law. She is passionate about social media and cyber law and how it affects people in society, particularly women and children. She has keen interest in the development of legislation in Africa pertaining to the digital space, including privacy laws, the protection of children on the digital space, the regulation of social media platforms, as well as other risks and challenges that continue to present themselves in the digital space. Our second guest speaker today, Devon Turner, is an attorney currently working at the Legal Resources Center. He has 5 years of experience in public interest law matters and has recently been working with the Legal Resources Center's projects in democratizing big tech and surveillance and human rights. Devon is also a member of the International Network of Civil Liberties Organizations and an oversight group member of the African Internet Rights Alliance. He has an LLB from the University of the Western Cape, summa cum laude, and an LLM from Trinity College in Dublin. Thank you, Lerato and Devon, and welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you so much for having us. Yeah, I'll start out. I just want to share my presentation itself. Good morning, everyone. Let me just get the sharing part. Okay. I'll just. Yeah. I hope everyone can see my screen.
Yes, Devon, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, yes, sure. So today I'm going to be generally discussing the use of social media within South Africa and the laws that pertain to it, and some of the harms that exist in the use of social media itself. Just get there. Okay, so on the use of social media, I think there are a few basic principles that I think will guide mostly your use of social media and avoiding falling afoul of the particular laws that apply to the use of social media. So I've covered a few of them here within the slide itself. These are quite simple, they generally, I mean, they're quite simple to follow. So I think it's a good guideline, even if you don't know the exact laws, to avoid any general abuses or violations of social media. So an important part of social media use, just in general, is responsible use of social media. Always thinking before you post on social media. So think of the consequences, think of it as a megaphone, and whatever you post then is then spread out to whatever your network is, and possibly tens, hundreds, and thousands of people. Importantly as well, there are legal consequences which stem from social media posts. Just because you're posting on social media, even if it's in your private capacity and your personal capacity, there are serious legal consequences that could stem from that use. Importantly as well, misleading the public could lead to serious trouble. It's an issue that we'll cover later on as well within the presentation. Another part on the labor side, Lerato will obviously cover that as well, but you can get fired for social media posts. So social media posts could generally have a labor implication on you as well as a worker. And then importantly, and I suppose which leads to the point of misleading the public, be careful of the post that you circulate itself. Always verify whether the post is true or not. You know, it's quite common, especially on social media, be it WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook. You receive a post about something, you then just pass it on to the next person. It causes a chain, but anyone within that chain itself could be held liable and could seriously have violated laws by circulating that post itself. So importantly, when we speak of social media and the law, I thought we'd do the starting point to all laws within South Africa. And the starting point for all laws in South Africa is our constitution, right? So there's a few specific provisions I thought I'd highlight just before we go and speak on social media use. Section 2 of the Constitution, one of the most important. So it just says the Constitution is the supreme law of the Republic. The Constitution is the law that binds everything else, and everything in one way or another has to comply with provisions that are in the Constitution itself. So importantly, in our Constitution, in Section 1, the first section within the Constitution itself, it speaks about constitutional values. So South Africa's constitutional values are a number of things, but some of them, especially pertinent to the use of social media and the law, are human dignity, equality, freedom, non-racialism, and non-sexism. These are some of the issues that I'll see later on. You'll see when examples are used that come very pertinent in the use of social media. Importantly as well, in Section 10 of our Constitution, it states that everyone has inherent dignity and the right to have their dignity respected and protected. Also, everyone has the right to privacy, and the right to privacy includes the right to not to have the privacy of your communications infringed. But we'll cover that as well on the specific postings. Importantly as well, everyone has the right to freedom of expression. South Africa has quite good protections for freedom of expression. But importantly, the right to freedom of expression does not extend to propaganda for war, incitement of imminent violence, or advocacy of hatred that is based on race, ethnicity, gender, religion, and that constitutes incitement to cause harm. It's quite common. We hear it all the time. Everyone has the right to freedom of expression. You have freedom of speech, but there's a justifiable limitation on your freedom of speech. And a lot of that has to do with hate speech and incitement for violence. Those are justified limitations of your right to speech. Importantly, it's a catch-all section in the Constitution itself, Section 36. And Section 36 just relates to limitations of rights. It just specifically provides that there's reasonable and justifiable reasons to limit your rights contained within the Constitution. So those are based on dignity, equality, and freedom. But what it means in essence is that every single right that you have in the Constitution is not unlimited. So your right to freedom of speech is not unlimited, where you can say anything and be fine and say, hey, I have my right to expression. It's the same like your right to life isn't unlimited, right? Sometimes that might be limited in the sense you think of someone that gets sent to prison. You know, they will say, I'm not living my life to the full. But, you know, if you commit a crime and the consequences are that you go to prison, that's a justifiable limitation on your right to life. Move on to the next slide. I will note as well that I'll make these slides available. So if anyone wants these slides to be distributed, I will share it with Ayabulela, and she can then distribute these slides as well. I thought that if we're doing the use of social media and the law, I want to provide some useful examples of limitations of your use of social media and possible violations that can happen, right? So possible things that you can do on any of the social media networks that could result in legal consequences, right? That could be a crime or at least a violation of someone's rights. Bear in mind that these examples that are used, a lot of them are contained within the South African Human Rights Commission's Charter, which is a very useful resource as well to use on what are the harms that can happen on social media. and what laws you can actually break in using social media. So we'll go to the first one. The first one is harmful expression. So at the heart of it lies, your right to freedom of expression, which lies at the heart of democracy and constitutes an indispensable element of a democratic society. The Constitution of South Africa is quite liberal itself with freedom of expression. It allows everyone to speak their mind without fear of undue recrimination. And I think emphasis on the word undue. You're allowed generally to have your freedom of expression. There's just some limitations on that. So importantly, when you share any content on social media, however, make sure that it does not include expression which could reasonably be understood to demonstrate a clear intention to be hurtful, harmful, and promote or propagate hate against another person based on their race, gender, sex, pregnancy, marital status, ethnic or social origin, their color, their sexual orientation, their age, disability, religion, conscience, belief, culture, language, birth, and HIV or AIDS status. It's a tongueful, right? It's a number of things that are covered within that. And that list itself is not a closed list. So there could be other criteria as well that isn't necessarily stated on that list. But importantly, then, to emphasize in the sense is that when you use expression, I mentioned that two specific limitations. If it amounts to hate speech, so if it is speech that, is propagating hatred towards another group, and it's based on one of these grounds that are stated, then that is not part of your right to freedom of expression. In fact, that falls specifically outside of your right to freedom of expression. And if you propagate hate and you spread hate, based on these characteristics, you actually don't have that protections and you could fully find yourself liable, right? And have violated someone else's inherent rights as found in the Constitution itself. Importantly as well, beyond incitement, beyond hate speech, which is of course just, propagating hatred towards another group, there's also incitement to violence, right? You can't use your freedom of expression to incite violence and then say, no, 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 but I have the right to say it. I have my freedom of expression. A great example, I can't go on social media and say, John Smith, I specifically say John Smith. John Smith is a man and I hate men. So please, everyone, go and attack John Smith. I can't do that. I can't say that is within my freedom of expression. I can say what I want to, and then use that then to rile up everyone else and say, let's go attack John, right? That's not legal. And there's real legal consequences that can stem from me saying that because I've now incited violence. That is, an act of violence, and I could very well be liable. Importantly as well, harmful expression can be in the form of direct statements, they can be in the form of jokes, photos, videos, poems, songs, artwork, they can be in the form of GIFs, memes, emojis, etc. So think of the wide gamut of ways that you can use social media, and those all could find yourself liable. So hate speech, I put out something that says, I hate people of color. I hate black people. Let's say I hate black people. I put out a GIF that degrades, people of color, right? So I put out a GIF that then says, a great example, you find it all the time. You compare something to an animal. So you say, I don't know, someone is a cockroach, or you say a group of people are a cockroach, and you put out a meme or a GIF that does the like, and you post it on your social media. You could very well find yourself liable for, for exercising harmful expression then and have violated that right to expression that you think that you may have. So these could have real consequences. I specifically provide some examples of the type that expression that is harmful, so it is using derogatory terms against members on the basis of one of their traits, the traits contained above. It can be something like using the K word or some kind of derogatory slur, related to someone's characteristics. Directly or indirectly, it can also be comparing members of a protected group to animals or insects. Like the example that I used, you use an animal to compare someone to, and I post it on social media. That could be a form of harmful expression. It can also be directly or indirectly communicating harmful stereotypes about a protected group. So if I, circulate a message that relates to a harmful stereotype against a particular group, there could be real consequences, legal consequences against me for that. It can also be encouraging people to shun or disassociate themselves from others or otherwise discriminate against a protected group, right? So it can be, me saying we should avoid speaking to group X, we should never speak to group X. Group X can't be trusted, right? And I then spread that on my social media. That is a violation. That is a harmful expression. And that could drive real world consequences, even though it's just a social media post itself, right? I can also be encouraging people to take violent action against a protected group or their property. I think I'm based in the Cape, so at the moment there's a taxi strike happening, and if I went on social media and I posted, there are people who are protesting, there are taxi drivers who are protesting. Let's all go, let's assemble, and let's go to the taxi rank, and let's fight with the taxi drivers that are protesting because they aren't allowing people to use their taxis. That could be a serious violation. I could be charged criminally and civilly as well for doing so, right? So these are some of the forms of harmful expression. This is one of the main issues that is raised on social media. This is one of the biggest violations that happen. And a lot of the time, I think people aren't aware of the fact that this is a violation. The other part as well, the second factor is defamation. So defamation is that you shouldn't post content that will negatively affect someone's reputation, right? So if you post content that negatively affects someone's reputation or even the reputation of an organization, you have to be aware of the few factors that you have to take into account, right? The only way that you can post something that negatively affects reputation is if the facts you're posting are true and sharing them benefits the public. So, great example. If I come out and I say, the DA in the Western Cape has not delivered on its promise to roll out X, let's just say X, let's say electricity. They haven't delivered on their promise to roll out electricity. I can't be tried by the DA can't say that I defamed their character if I can show that it's true because there hasn't been proper rollout, and I can also show that there's benefits to public, right? Additionally, as well, if you're sharing a comment that is honestly held opinion based on true facts that you clearly state, or that's a matter of public knowledge, then you haven't defamed someone. So that is me saying, in my opinion, the DA has not rolled out enough electricity in the Western Cape. It is my opinion. They could say, no, we've rolled out 90%, but from my opinion, I can say the area that I live in is that 10%, and we don't have electricity. In my opinion, they haven't rolled out enough electricity, or they haven't rolled out as they said they would, right? That wouldn't be defamatory in its nature. Importantly, that law of defamation protects every person from an unjustified attack on their reputation. The right to protect your reputation is part of your right to human dignity, which is found within the Constitution itself. A great example of something that's defamatory, it would be me saying someone that I don't know, they haven't been accused of any kind of crime or theft, right? And I publish on my social media, Tom, who works in my office, is a thief, right? I say Tom is a thief. I have no evidence of the fact that Tom is a thief. Tom has never been convicted or charged with theft. And I just post, Tom is a thief because I think that during my lunchtime on that one Wednesday, that Tom took my sandwich. And I don't know, but I suspect that it might have been Tom. And then I go post on my social media, Tom is a thief. He's a dishonest person. He cannot be trusted. And I have no evidence to back it. I just have my gut feel. And then I go publish the fact that Tom is a thief and he cannot be trusted. That would be defamatory, right? It's very common for social media use to discuss and comment on actions taken by famous or well-known people. When it comes to famous or well-known people, public persons, be it celebrities or sports stars, politicians, etc., the threshold for famous people or popular people is a little higher, right? I can then say, I can say, whoever's in charge of the ANC in the Free State, is dishonest. That wouldn't be defamatory. I can say, no, I have this evidence. But I can also say, they're a public figure. And what I'm saying is based on the fact that the government there has been accused of theft or has been charged with theft, I can reasonably then say so without having defamed anyone, right? So the threshold a lot of the time is higher when it's someone within the public itself. We'll move on to the next slide. When it's defamation and when you refer to someone in a negative manner or in a context which makes it possible for that person to identify it, you should be mindful of that possibility when defaming that person. So I know sometimes you think to yourself, I use social media to say someone is dishonest, be it Tom. Let's use Tom as the example again. I want to use social media to say that Tom is dishonest, but I don't want to say Tom's name because maybe that is too obvious that I'm defaming Tom's name. So I then indirectly, I say my manager at Perco, my line manager at Perco or whatever it is, whatever company it is. I say at the Legal Resources Center, my regional director, Cape Town office, is dishonest, right? So in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, I never said the person's name, but reasonably, it's easy for someone to identify who that person is. And that person's reputation can still be affected, even though I didn't say their name specifically, but I clearly underline what their role is and what they do within a place, right? So be very careful of that, be mindful of that, because indirectly you can still be, tried for defamation and have a civil suit. So important when you're posting any content about, and you're thinking that defamation might happen, there's a few questions you can ask yourself, will the content that I am about to post about this person or organization cause the audience to think less of them? So is what I'm posting causing people to think less of them, right? Has it affected their reputation, their good reputation, I should say? If the answer is yes, then the content is possibly defamatory, right? So it's important to know, am what I am saying affecting that person's reputation negatively? Remember, there's a few exceptions to that, be it the truth or in public interest. But remember that you are allowed to publish a defamatory factual allegation should the facts you are publishing be true, right? So if you're going to do something that is defamatory in nature, being defamatory in nature isn't the violation itself, because you can have a justified reason to be defamatory, right? If you can say, I have evidence of this, there's been a trial, right? Tom has actually been in prison for theft in the past. So Tom is dishonest or he can't be trusted. Then if that is true and it's within the public interest, you might not have defamed someone, but always be aware of the fact that you can defame someone. And the consequences of defaming someone is a civil suit, a defamation suit, where someone can actually take you to court and ask for damages. And when it comes to defamation, the remedy normally is, a court case. It's a civil court case in which the person will ask for that statement that you made to be retracted, so publicly retracted and a public apology given. And it could also involve, monies being given to someone for the defamation that has in fact occurred because it's affected their reputation, personally and even professionally as well, right? Another good justification or exception to defamation itself is fair comment, right? So fair comment is you are allowed to share your opinions, even if your opinions are defamatory. But importantly, what you must say must be framed as an opinion and not a fact, right? You must refer to the facts that inform your opinion in your statements, right? So this is when people can consider when they're considering. So it's important that you verify your information, right? Because if you say it's fair comment because it's my opinion, in my opinion, I can say, in my opinion, Tom is a thief, right? but I have no evidence for it, I can't then say it was fair comment because it's based on my gut feel that Tom is dishonest. But if I actually see Tom take that sandwich out of the fridge, and I saw him take it out of the fridge, and I know it's my sandwich, and I have the facts for it, and I have the evidence, I can then make a fair comment and say, in my opinion, Tom is a thief, Tom is dishonest. I saw Tom take the sandwich out of the fridge, right? So you're allowed to do so if you give your opinion, but it's important that the facts that you make use of for that opinion is in fact, verified and is true. Another important violation that happens on social media is privacy, right? Importantly, do not post private content or personal information about another person without their consent, right? It's very important. So examples of private content and personal information, include someone's cell phone numbers, their email addresses, their home address, photographs or videos, audio recordings of a private conversation, screenshots of direct messages, financial information, health information, information about intimate relationships and interactions. So very important. It's quite a wide net, but you have to respect someone's privacy rights. Privacy regarding media. So generally, you should not share audio recordings involving others unless they reveal something illegal or you have consent. So unless you have consent, then you can, publish someone's audio recordings. Also, if they've committed a crime, right, you can actually, especially like think of it in a court setting. In a court setting, if you're asked to bring forward evidence, you can't say, no, but I didn't get the person's consent to give it. You actually can. You should only share screenshots of private conversations with other people if you have the permission or you have the consent of the other parties, right? So it's important because I think a lot of the time people's messages are being screenshot and they didn't necessarily ask for permission, and what they did was not illegal, right? So it's very important not to violate that privacy right. Importantly, if someone asks you to remove a photo or a video of themselves from social media, you should do so immediately. I know a lot of the time we post a video or a picture of someone and we don't even think of the fact that that person might not want it to be posted, because of their privacy concerns. And I'd say, 90% of the time, the person maybe doesn't have an issue. It's your friend, it's your colleagues from work. But there are times where someone might have a problem with you posting a picture or a video. The moment that they ask you to remove it, do so as soon as possible, right? The only exceptions to that, if it's a video or picture in which someone is doing something illegal and there's a public benefit in the publication, or they have no reasonable expectation of privacy, then you can publish it. A good example of that is, think of someone in a public space. So someone's at the mall, and in the middle of the mall, they stop everything. They stand on their soapbox inside the mall and they shout out loud inside the mall, and they're shouting and screaming and they're going on a diatribe about something in the middle of the mall. And you take a video of it, that person can't reasonably say, I have my right to privacy. You can't post a video of me screaming and shouting inside the mall, right? There's no reasonable expectation that they wanted their privacy rights to be respected when they clearly went out into a public space and then, screamed out to everyone within a mall itself. Importantly as well, do not identify by name or otherwise indirectly a victim or a survivor of sexual violence without their prior consent, right? It's important. It's also important to note that there's no special provisions that relate to children's privacy. That there are special provisions that relate to children's privacy. So, if there's someone that's a survivor of sexual violence, you need their permission to come out and say this person is a survivor of sexual violence, right? Because their privacy rights entail that they don't need it to be made public. Also, when you're involved with children, it's important. It's very strict when it comes to children, right? That their privacy rights are maintained. So without the consent of the parents, or if it's the child is left in a vulnerable position, distributing and publishing that information could be a serious violation of the child's rights itself. Just a few things on privacy. Everyone has the right to privacy, without a doubt, right? The right to privacy is contained in Section 14 of the Constitution. But given the nature of sharing that happens in social media, it can sometimes be easy to cross the line when it comes to privacy without even realizing it. So before you share any information about another person, ask yourself these simple questions. Would the sharing of the information intrude into a person's private life or affairs? Is this the kind of content that an ordinary person would usually keep to themselves or share only with their circle of trusted people, right? Also, would the other person be uncomfortable sharing this information with the people who I'm about to share it with, right? Is it a closed group? So, good example of this. There's a lot of times where you're sitting at home, you're sitting in your lounge, your group of friends, there's 10 to 15 of you. You're speaking about something, a picture is taken and it's shared within your friends group itself. That's all fair and good. Let's say the picture itself was you and your friends, just having a drink, right? But you're drinking and it's in your private space, it's within the home, it's within the living room. And you just send it amongst your friends group, if you're the person that then takes that information and you post it publicly somewhere where all your hundred or thousands of followers can see it, you could be violating your friend's right to privacy because they had a reasonable expectation that what happens within the living room of the house would only be shared amongst the people that were there and not necessarily on a public forum like your Facebook account where thousands can see it and possibly even, an employer can see it, right? So be mindful of that when you do so. The only reasonable limit expectations are, if that person posts on their Instagram or their Facebook and it's a public account, and you do the same, that person can't say no, but my privacy right says that you can't do it because I didn't consent to it. But on the other side, they're putting it out within a public space as well without any limitations, right? So bear that in mind. So bear that in mind always when you're doing something, right? Um, Also with private information, I mentioned that. Okay, so important as well, very important. I know it comes up all the time, but it's also important to be aware that when you share personal information without consent of someone, you might be breaching the Protection of Personal Information Act, the POPI Act. We hear about the POPI Act all the time. And I think, in essence, one of the most important provisions within the POPI Act itself is the fact that you need to have someone's consent before you post and publish any information of them, especially personal information. Another area as well that you could violate in terms of social media, it's called crimen injuria. So what crimen injuria is, I would class it as an extreme form of defamation, right? So it's about not posting content which is degrading, humiliating, or seriously insulting. If it reaches that threshold of being degrading, humiliating, or seriously insulting to another person, you could find yourself guilty of crimen injuria. The difference between crimen injuria and defamation is a civil suit, right? So civil suit, it happens in civil courts. The remedy will be like a apology and retraction and monies gets paid out. But when it's crimen injuria, this is actually a crime. So you could actually go to jail. You could go to jail for criminal injury, and it's actually a criminal trial that happens. Importantly, so it's about do not post content which could seriously impair the dignity of another person. Racism, homophobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, doxing, cyberbullying. A great example of criminal injury is the Penny Sparrow case, right? A few years ago, Penny Sparrow, the realtor who posted a video online in which she compared Black people to monkeys online. And she was actually tried for criminal injury. So she genuinely got a criminal case against her because what she did seriously impaired the dignity of that group of people that she then referred to in a video. And she actually, was tried and convicted and actually served jail time because she committed a serious crime, right? Important as well, for criminal injury, um, an important element of it is intention, of course, but obviously bear in mind that it does not require publication to a third party for it to be criminal injury. There have been cases in the past where someone sending a direct message from one person to another. So, you call someone the K word and you send it in a direct message. You could still be liable for criminal injury. It's not as much the publishing part that makes it criminal injury. It's even a direct insulting or degrading thing that you do or say. Important as well, I'll just go through it shortly. Harassment and bullying. So harassment and bullying, cyberbullying, right? One of the most common things, a relatively newer thing that has come about. Cyberbullying and harassment online is also a violation of social media, right? Um, do not post content, which amounts to cyberbullying. In many ways, cyberbullying is an extension of actual harassment, so in-person harassment that then gets spread over into actually being cyberbullying. It's still a violation, right? There's serious harms that come from it. Do not post content which amounts to sexual harassment of another person. Bear in mind this, right? I think it applies all over in the public space, but I think particularly so even within the workspace, you have to be aware of these things, right? Any kind of harassment or bullying is a serious violation in general in use of social media, but is particularly relevant within the workplace where it happens, where it happens quite commonly, right? So cyberbullying involves targeting a social media user in a way which results in mental, emotional, physical, economic harm, right? So it's behavior aimed at scaring, angering, or shaming those who are targeted. One of the biggest forms of cyberbullying even happens in the form of doxing, right? So harassment online can take many forms. It can be trolling, which very common word today, which is deliberate provocation, upsetting and accosting of others, online and unsolicited communications. Believe it or not, but harassment can also be, I refer to the online unsolicited communications, but it could be bombarding someone within the work group all the time. Every single morning they get bombarded with, I don't know, news articles like propaganda. Um, Common example, like every morning you get that good morning message, or you get pictures throughout the course of the day, and it's relentless. That can still be deemed as harassment as well, right? Because it's unsolicited communications, and the person says they don't want it anymore, and you just keep on sending it. It could be deemed harassment. Important as well, unsolicited sexual content. Like happens if you like send pornography to someone, you could be violating their rights, right? It could be a form of harassment and bullying if you're sending unsolicited sexual content or advances even, which stems to that sexual harassment part. Even shaming someone, creating fake accounts or trying to impersonate the targeted person, creating memes, images, and fake videos to taunt or humiliate, and even sharing incidents of bullying. Very common. It's more common at schools, between school children, sharing videos of someone being bullied. But it could happen in the workplace as well, workplace bullying as well. If you share this content, even if you're not the one that's the bully, you could be deemed as a cyberbully who has in fact harassed someone online. Another example quickly that I'll go shortly through as well, image-based violence. So best example of image-based violence, it could be a violation, is so-called revenge porn, right? So revenge for someone, you then circulate or distribute sexual content, pornography of someone where they didn't give consent to, and you then circulate it. Even if you're not the one that originally recorded it, you could still be liable based on the fact that you've circulated a video of someone without their consent and it's video of a sexual nature, be it a video or a photograph even. Importantly, and this is the last one that I'll do as well on examples, disinformation and misinformation. This is one of the big ones. It's one of the biggest. I think it's probably the one where I think violations probably happen the most often. It's right at the top of the list, right? So do not share information that you suspect may be false, or where you have not determined whether the source of that information is credible, right? If a social media post elicits an immediate, like emotional response, such as outrage, fear, disgust, or dismay, just pause and reflect on the source and the veracity of the content before you share it, right? Be truthful and accurate on social media. And if you have to, just err on the side of caution when engaging with peddlers of false information. We all have that family member, that friend, that aunt that is constantly giving out false information. So if you get it from that person, please first verify the information, right? If it can't be a trusted source, then please first verify whether this is in fact true before you spread it, because you could be liable as well for spreading disinformation or misinformation and you didn't even know that it was, but that's because it's an obligation on you also to verify and make sure that it's the truth, right? Importantly, sharing disinformation or misinformation can have serious and sometimes criminal consequences. So some steps that you should take before you share information. Assume that the information received is false until proven otherwise. Fact check all posts, comments, and links by checking the source of the link that you send. Be extra vigilant if the author of the post or the comment is an anonymous account, right? Check whether the source is reputable, right? And they're reporting the story. Consider whether the information or the article evokes an overly emotional response. If yes, then it could be, disinformation or misinformation. Importantly, in trying to differentiate the differences between disinformation and misinformation. So disinformation is false, inaccurate, or misleading information designed and presented online to intentionally cause public harm. And intention is the big difference between disinformation and misinformation. If I intentionally create content that is false, inaccurate, or misleading, and I promote it online, if I intentionally do that, if I meant to do so, that is considered disinformation. If I don't intend, but I still distribute information that is inaccurate, false, or misleading, that is misinformation, right? Both are liable, just the one has intent, so I meant to spread false news. The other one, I didn't mean to, but I still spread false news because I didn't verify and I just spread it out, right? Great example here, a great example. So an unwitting family member, say your uncle, right, shares an advertisement promoting a herbal remedy on social media that can allegedly cure a terminal disease that has the uncle has no intention to do harm, right? Conversely, the company that manufactures and sells that product using the advertisement based on false information has the intention to cause financial or physical harm. Your uncle who spreads the news about this medicine that cures, let's say, cancer, he believes that this is a real medicine, right? He has misinformation because this medicine doesn't. But the company who makes the medicine and advertise, that is disinformation because they know that it can't cure that cancer and they spread it out, right? A good example of the difference, right? In both cases, the information is false, but the distinction rests in the intention of the person, right? Importantly as well, this information can cause public harm when it interferes with or infringes the public's right to make informed decisions about matters of public importance, right? Great example, the COVID-19 pandemic, right? There's real public harm in you spreading misinformation or disinformation even, right? Because people might not be able to seek the necessary medical attention that they need because you then spread information that says, don't go to the hospital, don't go to the doctor, don't get the medical checks that's necessary because, this is all this grand conspiracy. Don't go get the vaccine. Great example. Or where you say, don't go get the vaccine because science has shown that they're implanting a chip that Bill Gates designed, and that's why you shouldn't go, right? Sometimes there can be misinformation. You didn't have the intention to mislead because you saw this, what looked like a real article. But it can also be disinformation if you come up with the story itself and you say this is the reasons why, right? Very important. So there's a public harm involved as well, right? In certain circumstances, the sharing of false information is particularly harmful, right? So false information about elections, right? Or undermining the trust in democratic institutions. False public health information like the pandemic itself. Or fake or altered images, right? There's a fake image of someone. You don't know if it's verified or not. I don't know. It's a picture of someone holding a knife. And you like spread the message and say, oh, that person is the murderer. You don't even know and finds out the image in fact was doctored. That can be disinformation or misinformation even, right? Even false information that mischaracterizes and vilifies someone, right? So there's a protest that happens. You then see a picture of the protest. You say, oh, that's why we can't trust Zimbabweans. Because in your opinion, this looks like Zimbabweans in the pictures on the protest. You say, this is why they can't be trusted. Look at how they're protesting. You haven't even verified whether this information is true or not. You don't even know. And yet you're spreading that this is why we shouldn't trust Zimbabweans. Just an example that I'm using, right? So the difference between a mis and disinformation is based on the intention, but the legal consequences may differ in severity, right? They both will, have legal consequences that stem from them. But if it's disinformation, sometimes the legal consequences can be even more severe because you intended for it. But it doesn't mean that misinformation is without consequences. There's still consequences. It's just maybe lighter because you didn't intend to, but you should be verifying your facts, right? Importantly, I thought, just some selected legislation beyond the Constitution itself. Legislation that applies to social media includes PEPUDA, the Promotion of Equality Act, the Protection of Personal Information Act, POPI itself, and more recently as well, there was the Forms and Publications Amendment Act, which is, colloquially referred to as a Social Media Act, that also provides good regulations. Also, the Children's Act, the Children's Act has always provided, controls on privacy of children and the welfare of children that should be considered when you post things on social media. Last slide as well. I just highlighted some of the possible consequences and I bracketed legal because some of them aren't necessarily lawful, like legal consequences in terms of the framework, but these are some of the things, right? So damages, right? Civil suits. You could be liable, to pay money or apologize or retract a statement if you violate any of those. If you do any of that conduct and it violates then, laws around the use of social media. There's criminal charges. I used Penny Sparrow as a great example. There can be legitimate criminal charges. On the damages side, I was just thinking, there was a famous incident, Adam Katsavalos, who was in Greece, and he posted something where he said, something very derogatory towards people of color. And he had a civil suit party. There was criminal charges as well, but part of his civil suit was, besides having to obviously retract his statement and apologize and damages given, he was even asked to do community service. So he actually had to do community service as well as part of the remedy. A lot of these matters are even heard in the Equality Court, so they put together quite a creative remedy. But there are real consequences. It could be community service, could be time in prison, and it could be monies paid out for that person. Importantly as well, there's the constitutional damages that can also be awarded. This is like violation of constitutional principles that could also, and an effective remedy could be done. Important as well, I highlight digital footprint. Now, digital footprint, your digital footprint isn't necessarily legal consequences because there aren't necessarily legal ramifications for these things. But I think you should bear in mind that when you're, applying for a job or you're trying to interact with society, bear in mind you have a digital footprint that can be monitored, right? So me, Devin, I go for a job interview. My employer then looks at my interview and says, this guy, he has the qualifications, but show me your social media. And then you go to my social media and you see that I am super, I don't know, QAnon. I'm a Trump supporter. I just want the wall to be built in America. I want a wall here in South Africa too. I'm homophobic, Islamophobic, anti-Semitic, all of those things in my social media. That's my digital footprint, and it could exclude me from a number of things just because this is the things that I post on my social media accounts. You have to be very much aware of that. The other thing as well, social exclusion and banning orders, right? I mean, if you know that someone where everything they post on the social media is negative, was derogatory, it's defamatory, it's insulting, there is social exclusion that happens as a consequence of their actions, right? And these are real consequences that can in fact happen from the use of social media itself. That is my presentation. Thank you very much. But thank you, it's been good. So I'll pass it on to Lerato to cover the labor law sides as well of social media use. Thank you, Lerato.
Thanks. Thanks, Devin. I'm just going to be brief since we're out of time. I'm just trying to find my presentation. Oh. Okay. Okay, it's still downloading. Okay, thank you for your time. So I'm not going to spend too much time because I think Devin covered everything, some of the things that I also wanted to mention. So I'm just going to keep it brief and just keep it to the workplace. My presentation is still loading. Can everyone see it?
Yes, you can see it.
Perfect. Okay. So social media the right way. I'm just going to start with digital footprint. As Devin had mentioned, a digital footprint is everything that you post about yourself online that is Googleable. So if I Google your name, for example, whatever comes up, that is your digital footprint. It is important to note that, people like to say on social media, look cute, might delete this later. Unfortunately, it will still be on the internet. So even if you delete something, it will still live in the internet. The internet never forgets, and everything that you post online does form part of your digital footprint. And basically what Devin mentioned, at the end of his presentation is your digital CV. So I've met quite a few candidates we've been interviewing at my workplace, and it's so interesting to find out, people, what they share about themselves in interviews and compared to what they share about themselves, online. And sometimes it can be very detrimental if someone is not being forthcoming or truthful about who they are as a person, because essentially it also includes your social media persona. So it's very important that you keep in mind that whatever you share online could form part of your digital footprint, which will also form part of the rest of my presentation. So you have one reputation, one lifetime. So it's quite important that you keep these things in mind, especially, for young people. If you are looking to get into a prominent university, they may not want to associate themselves with you, especially seeing your conduct on social media. Potential employees, employers, like I mentioned, potential partners, for example, especially if you're going to be dating and you're using online dating, it might be detrimental depending on what you post. Brands, if you're in, the influencing world or the marketing world, opportunities as well. So it is quite important what you put out online. So the impact, obviously, of, your online presence, poor judgment on social media could also lead to heavy consequences. I'm just briefly going to focus on the employer. So for an employer, obviously, if the employees are not behaving in a way that is, of good rapport or of good reputation for the company, whatever you do on social media as an employee could obviously be detrimental to them. They maybe, lose profits as a result of your conduct, or misconduct on social media, reputational damages, the risk of being held vicariously liable for your conduct. So being vicariously liable for your conduct basically means that you've posted it, but your employer will then, face the fire. So as David mentioned in his presentation, whether it's a civil lawsuit, whether it's a criminal lawsuit, employers could face that repercussion, based on your content. So misconduct of an employee can be quite detrimental to that. I will get into that as well as I proceed. Okay. So now let's get into just the nitty-gritties. Things employees should avoid posting on social media. I've discussed briefly, some of the consequences that employers could face, with employees posting online. So it's quite important, as Devin mentioned, he mentioned the freedom of expression. As much as we do have the freedom of expression, we have a moral and legal responsibility as well, not to infringe on other people's rights. I think he went into that in quite good detail. I'm just going to skip through these because I have ones that are more fun. So, for example, so he mentioned Penny Sparrow. So I don't know if you can see, but this is the post that Penny Sparrow actually posted. And, obviously her estate agent who was the employer was obviously appalled by what happened. She had to issue an apology, but it was too late for her, and she was charged with criminal injuria, and she had to do what they call sensitivity training, which was recommended by the South African Human Rights Commission. So sensitivity training involves, getting you to understand what you did was wrong, because sometimes it's very easy to just slap a fine on someone or, jail them, imprison them, but they actually don't understand the level of gravity that they've actually inflicted on a group of people, their human dignity. So it's quite important that they also undergo sensitivity training, which is also one of the things that you could actually be sanctioned, or probably one of the consequences that would follow if you're charged with criminal injuria. Devin mentioned sexually explicit photos and videos without someone's consent. So in a workplace setting, obviously, if you're dating someone, it's also very important that, employees have a relationship contract. So I like to use relationship contracts, especially in the workplace. It's quite important for my clients to have this, because then it puts them in more of so they're able to mitigate their consequences better. So for example, let's say I'm in a relationship at work, it goes sour, and then now someone, my boyfriend at work decides to distribute my pictures that I sent to him in private. They decide to send them via email, for example, a work email. They send it to everyone. That could be quite detrimental to me and also my employer, because essentially my employer, if they don't have a relationship contract in place, it's quite difficult for them to discipline me or to discipline him for his conduct. So it's quite important as well. And then, okay, I don't know. Yeah. Okay, sorry. And then, so I'll just go into another thing. Obviously, do not share or do not use social media to badmouth or embarrass your employer or co-workers, for example. So I know often we like to go on social media to vent about our frustration, about how our day was, or how horrible our bosses are, or the people that we work with. I'll just mention a case where someone was actually fired because they said that they posted online that working for Indian people is the pits. And that amounted to hate speech, and the employer obviously decided to fire that person because of that content. Also, avoid sharing company secrets or information on social media, no matter how tempting it can be. Especially even after you've left the company, you have a legal obligation to keep their company secrets safe. And obviously, if you decide to share that content, especially on social media, you could be sued. So it's very important that you respect confidentiality at all costs. Tweeting or posting during working hours. So unless, tweeting is a part of your job, maybe you're a journalist, maybe you're a social media influencer, or maybe you're part of marketing, it's very important that you avoid tweeting or posting on social media while you're at work. So always keep your social media use at work at minimum, especially when you're at work. So limit it to your lunch break or your tea break. And if social media is a part of your job, it is important to stick to the professional account instead of moving, between the two. So in another CCM case, an employee was obviously posting on behalf of the company. They kind of forgot, and they ended up posting their personal things on the company profile. And they were obviously fired for that because it was a misconduct, because what they had posted was not in good spirit, and it did not align with the values of the company. So it is quite important that you avoid that, especially if you are working in that field where you have to use social media, you have to use Twitter or whatever. Make sure that you are logged off from your own personal account, because it is very, very tricky to try and manage the two. You might think that you're still on the company website or the company profile. Next thing, you're posting things that, might be fun for you and your friends, but not really great for the company. Also, Another thing is oversharing. Oversharing. So if the news is not yours to share, do not share it. So avoid, sharing things that you're not supposed to share. So, for example, resignations. Somebody has been promoted. Somebody there's restructuring in the office, for example, and maybe you work for HR. It's quite important, not to share the news when it's not your place to do that. So don't share the news, especially, recently I was doing training for a community radio station, and somebody asked me, like, what if just to create the hype, I already drop hints on like who the lineup is going to be. You're going to be absolutely fired because what you're doing, it's not your place to do it. You're not supposed to make the announcement. There's a social media team, there's a marketing team, there's a management team that is in charge of that. So if the news is not for yours to share, don't share it. Don't even comment on it if you're invited somewhere and they ask you about it. Don't comment on it until, the necessary person has done that. And then obviously, avoiding distasteful statements and comments online. These include obviously racist, defamatory, or offensive content towards any gender, religion, race, ethnicity. Devin mentioned Pepuda earlier, and Pepuda has basically the rest of the things that you might not want to say: sexual orientation, pregnancy, health, things like that. Pepuda does provide for that. And then another important thing that people, think they have is disclaimer. You think that because you're going to slap a disclaimer on your social media platform that your company is not going to fire you, or that you're not, going to be responsible for your content. Unfortunately, sometimes disclaimers are not enough. You might put a disclaimer, but your company might feel that, you still put our company's name into disrepute. It's not enough that you have a disclaimer, and hence you could also be fired just by having a disclaimer. So it is quite important that you prevent that from happening. So the last thing that I just want to share, because I see it's 10 o'clock, we've reached the 10 o'clock mark, but I like to use this analogy. Think before you post. Ask yourself these 5 questions. Is it true? Is it harmful? Is it illegal? Is it necessary? And is it kind? So is it true? Devin spoke a lot about disinformation and information. Make sure that you verify everything that you check, especially within the workplace space and in your personal space. Make sure that before you tweet or before you post anything, verify the facts and make sure that it is true. Another thing is that is it harmful? So we spoke about, Devin also spoke about harmful content, cyberbullying, image-based violence, revenge pornography, and the likes. So is it harmful? Is it going to be harmful to your company? Is it going to be harmful to someone else that you've posted about? If the answer is yes, avoid doing it. Is it illegal? So we spoke about some of the legislation that exists, the Form and Publication Amendment Act. We spoke about, I don't know if you mentioned it, but Protection from Harassment Act, the Cyber Crimes Act as well, which mentions malicious communication. And this basically malicious communication threatening a group of people, threatening to cause damage to their property. That's malicious communication. Revenge pornography, or what Devin also mentioned as image-based violence, that's also protected under Cyber Crimes Act. So is it illegal? So if the answer is yes, rather not do it. If you're posting on the job, or maybe you're posting in your personal content, your own personal content, and you have a public profile. I will go into that. I wish I had more time to speak about the private, your private profile versus your public profile, and what that means, and how you can actually protect yourself, because there have been matters where people have posted their content, and it was in their private capacity, or in the accounts were private. And then unfortunately one of the employees, helped the company to actually look, and the company actually fired that person. They said even though it was a private account, it was still on a public platform, and any of those friends could feel that the company's values are not great, or the views on the company will change, and that might be detrimental to the company, so hence they would be fired. Is it necessary? In my presentation earlier, I spoke about is it necessary, speaking on behalf of the company and, making announcements on, company issues when it's not your place? So is it necessary? Also think about that when you're posting about that. And then the last one is it kind? I think sometimes, on social media, we get so excited. We think that we know the people, we become overly familiar with people and with celebrities, and we think we can clap back and we can do all of that. I love that Devin touched on defamation, because we've been seeing quite a bit of defamation cases where obviously, public figures are involved, politicians are involved, and, their reputation obviously is brought to the line. And that is actually quite important. Also with, cyberbullying, our firm, does a lot of protection orders where, kids are being cyberbullied, or mothers or, partners are harassing their ex-partners or their current partner's abuse. So is it kind? And, are you posting it on the internet? I've had cases where, in schools, kids will take content of each other, bullying each other, and then, they don't take it to the person, to the principal to actually prove the bullying, and they post it online. It is not kind on the victim, who's being abused, and it is documented. So it is not fair on that. So it is quite important that we remain kind on the internet, because essentially it does form part of our digital footprint. And also it says a lot about you as a person. I wish I had time to just speak, but briefly, I'll just speak about, I wanted to share this video, but I'll play it after. I just wanted to, speak briefly on social media policy. So it's important that if you're in a workplace, please ask them whether there's a social media policy in place, because it's quite important that you know what your company expects from you. Demand, actually, if there is a social media policy that is in place, demand that you get training on it, because what's the point of having a policy that is gathering dust somewhere and you don't know about it, and you're expected to obviously to it, you're expected to, keep things, or keep the company's name and good rapport. So it's quite important that if there is a social media policy in place, that you do know, what it contains. You must be trained on it. You must know exactly what it is on. I don't know if there's any employers here, but I'll just give just a few things on, certain things that you need, or that you need to have in your social media policy, just for it to give you guidelines. So number one is make it clear who's authorized to speak on behalf of the company, in the media, on social media, and just in general. So make sure that, the person who's authorized knows that they're authorized, and that, nobody can be making announcements on behalf of the company when they're not authorized to. Make sure that the social media policy has confidentiality. So protect the confidentiality clause of your company, including your company secrets and client information. Regulate the use of the company's trademarks. So not anything or anyone can just use the trademark, put it on a poster, without the permission. So it's quite important that that's in there as well. And also clearly state what the company deems acceptable methods of business communication. So for example, is it allowed for the company to have a WhatsApp group? WhatsApp groups are quite contentious, especially in the labor market, especially in the workplace. So does your company allow WhatsApp groups? Is it important, what are the guidelines? What are the rules for the WhatsApp group? How are people supposed to be conducting themselves? Are we supposed to be sending memes every now and again? What's the time limit for the WhatsApp group? Are you allowed to text me after 5 o'clock in the WhatsApp group? Are we allowed to just share anything in the WhatsApp group? So those things are quite important, especially in a social media policy, including communications within a WhatsApp group, how people need to conduct themselves, the certain rules and regulations that need to be in the WhatsApp group, the administrators, because essentially administrators will then be held liable for whatever happens in the WhatsApp group. So it's quite important to find out before you get to an organization, you decide to start a WhatsApp group, and there's a policy of no WhatsApp groups, only emails or whatever. So it's quite important that you do that. Also provide guidelines for participation on social media. What are your company values? How do you expect your employees to behave? Some companies might require you, to post on your LinkedIn page, to associate themselves, or for you to associate yourself with the company. Make sure that you know those things, so that you can decide whether you're comfortable with being presented in that light, whether you want to mention that where you work. So those are the conversations, or that's the kind of content that also needs to be there. And then an important one is education. It is very important that employees are educated about the risks of posting social media content that might not put the company in best light. So it's important that you're trained on the social media policy, you're trained on copyright infringements or anti-competitive comments and discriminatory and offending comments. So basically what me and Devin have presented here, the company should essentially do the same, especially when they talk about the social media policies. There might be obviously certain things that they will want to focus on in terms of social media policies, in terms of their own organization and what they believe and what they want to put forward. So it's quite important. That's the end of my presentation. I'm just going to play this video just for something to think on. I think I love this video because it speaks to social media usage, our free will, and basically how we conduct ourselves. So I hope you will enjoy. I hope it will play. And that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, over to you.
Thank you so much, Lerato. I'd like to thank both our speakers, Lerato and Devin, for sharing their knowledge and insights on social media and the law. I think a lot of us learned some new information, particularly about the law when it comes to social media. So first question that I have, and I think I'll direct it to you, Lerato, because you spoke about oversharing. So let's say I post something on my close friends or on my WhatsApp status, night out with my friends, and then someone, a colleague that I work with, sees it, right? So they come to the office the next day and they talk publicly about what they saw, and now everyone has an opinion on what I was doing over the weekend with my friends. Meanwhile, it's actually something I posted in private on my WhatsApp status that's just available to my contacts. So what is the law or
Okay,
around that?
So how to answer this question is that actually we were having this conversation about close friends, that it's so important that, your close friends list, you let them know that, guys, you're part of my close friends list. I'm sharing personal information here that only you guys have been pre-selected to see. I would appreciate it if you would respect my privacy, would respect my boundaries, and don't post this forward. Because I think sometimes we have this expectation that we're able to and a close friends list, especially on Instagram, you can see it. So that's great. But on WhatsApp, it's very difficult because you can only share with specific people. But I don't know that I'm part of a close friends list. I'm thinking maybe you're broadcasting it to all your friends. So I think within that ambit, especially on WhatsApp, because you don't know whether you're part of a close friends list. You just see a status, you're thinking, maybe I'm part of the thousands of contacts that she's shared this with. I'm going to take a screenshot and then I'll share it later or whatever. I'll share it with other people. So I think it is very important to create that boundary with those close friends or your close people to say, I'm only sharing this with you guys. I would appreciate it if you would respect my boundaries and if you would respect my privacy.
Okay, so now what happens if you share that kind of information to say, guys, please respect my boundaries. However, you still come to the office and that person talks loudly about what you were doing over the weekend, then...
Yeah, I think it would depend on what kind of content it is. So if it is content that is harmful, towards you and it's harmful to your job, or, it's detrimental to you keeping your job, or maybe something that, you're keeping close and it's private facts or private information, I think then you would have some sort of legal remedy or a legal recourse. If it's something that is illegal that you've done, and obviously this person is now blurting it out and talking to everyone about it, you might obviously need to face the fire, and you might obviously be liable for whatever content that you've posted that they've shared without your consent, especially if it is illegal. So I think it's just a boundary thing. And what also Devin mentioned is that reasonable expectation of privacy, so if you've posted something on a public platform, whether it's a close friends list, whether it's not a close friends list, if you've posted it on public and it lives in the public domain, it might be very difficult for you to prove otherwise that you had reasonable expectation of privacy. So I think it's a matter of a conversation and a matter of what kind of content was actually posted. Because as soon as you've posted it, you might not have legal recourse, especially if it is detrimental to you and if it's illegal, and if somebody has posted it without your consent, unless it falls in the ambit of private information or personal information, and it forms part of that ambit of things that are deemed as illegal, then you would obviously have a legal fact. For example, revenge pornography. If somebody shares pictures of you nude or videos of you nude, or if somebody is a peeping Tom and taking a video of you while you take a shower, they're invading your privacy. So obviously you would then have legal recourse in that instance.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, why is it that what I do, or rather my views in my personal space and individually, are tied back to my employer? I feel like it kind of takes away from my individualism.
I don't know if you want to take it, Devin, but I'm happy to answer it. I think it really depends on the context of where your individuality is. And also it's very, it's also entrenched in the type of values that you have for yourself and the type of values that your employer wants to have for yourself. For example, if I'm working for a council of South African churches, for example, I'm expected to behave in a certain way. I'm expected to, live certain values. So if I'm going to live outside of that, even in my personal capacity online, it might be detrimental to somebody, a client or stakeholder who says, wait a minute, you work for the Council of Churches of South Africa, but here you were doing ungodly things. So I think it really, really depends on the type of values that you have for yourself and the type of values that your company might have for you as well. Because we are expected to live a life and be individual. But I think if it will be detrimental to your company, then they have to obviously act and obviously protect their brand and protect their interests as a company as well. So because they pay for your salary as well, because you're a representative of their company as well, especially if you put it out there that you work for this. I mean, we've seen it in cancel culture where we've called people out, we look where they work, and we send messages to their companies to say, we don't want this person living here. They don't represent the brand. If you don't remove this person, we will be boycotting your thing. So I think it's that relationship of values, a relationship of boundaries, and a relationship of being able to, keep your reputation, clean, especially if it's associated with the company. So I think once there's that association with the company, it's very difficult for you to be an individual if you won't represent the values of the company in good faith and in the best light.
So the next question is, as a parent, is it lawful to post my kids from birth to maybe teenage age pictures on social media, taking into consideration that they did not agree to sharing their pictures with the public?
So that's something that I'm actually very passionate about. I don't believe that, yes, it's your child, you can do whatever you want, you have parental rights and responsibilities, but I don't think it's fair for a child to have a digital footprint that they didn't consent to at all. There are so many risks when it comes to children and the internet and posting them online. There's things like child abuse, sexual images, what in South Africa we call child pornography. So this is when you post someone, a child naked, or, there's a whole ring. There was a case recently of Gerard Ackerman, and there was also an advocate, I think he committed suicide. And they were part of this ring of actually sexually grooming young children. And they were getting their details and they were luring them on social media platforms. I always speak about this. So I believe that social media platforms have a responsibility to play, especially when they have age restrictions on their social media platforms. They need to actually make sure that they adhere to that. When a child is 13, they need to be able to verify that the child is 13. So I think we put too much on. I don't believe that, as I mentioned, it's good practice to post your child on social media, especially on a public platform, and people will make the analogy that no, but, they're a social media influencer or they're an influencer. I always make reference to TV ads. You see the child, they're doing the job, but you don't know their name, you don't know their personal details, you don't know who their mom is. They got the job through an agent. You just see their face, you're using their image and their likeness. But on social media, it's like, as soon as I post Lerato, as Lerato Ntwambe, I post my child, you already know that I'm the mother. You already know. You can find out maybe if you've posted, I did a campaign a while back where I said, don't post your bundle of joys on their first day of school with their uniform, because when you post those things, it's very easily for me to find out from your thread where your child goes to school, all the child milestones. I can go to a child and tell them some of the things that you've posted about them, where they've been vulnerable about themselves, or where you've posted them potty training. And I think it's unfair for you to post that content, knowing well that one day they'll be 16 years old, and then now they're Googling themselves and all they're seeing is, themselves potty training or embarrassing things about them. And I think we had the privilege of having photo albums. And I think, why don't you keep a photo album for your child? If you want to create a profile, but let it be private, let it be limited to certain people so that you can actually give it to the child at some point, but at least they would have consented to that. I know it's not always practical. There's a lot of money to be made, especially in influencing and in kids influencers. We're also interested. I follow even some of the kid influencers. So I think there is that battle, but I think we need to be able to protect them. We need to be able to ensure that they're educated, they know what is important, they know, not to be lured into situations, they know the dangers of social media, cyberbullying, child sexual abuse material, doxing. So all the things, they need to be taught at school. They need to be taught by you as a parent. So I think it's quite important that you mentioned that. There was something that I wanted to mention, which has now kind of slipped my mind, but it was also referring to children. But yeah, I think with posting children, be mindful, because everything that you share could be used against you, could be used against your child. I remember when I did the campaign, they were like, you're alarming kids, you're alarming parents. And then shortly after that, there was a lot of kidnapping and ransom, because there's that big thing that, where now, they'll kidnap your child. They know that you're wealthy. They see your lifestyle or whatever you portray on social media, and they're like, what's R1 million? You can give me R1 million. And we've seen that syndicate more and more and more. And it is because of social media. There's definitely a causal link there.
Thank you, Lerato. The next question is, what if you are at an event, government or political rally, and they take a picture or a video and post it? Do you have a right to request that they take it down? I'm assuming this person appears in the picture or video.
Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah. I mean, I think it goes to what Lerato was also mentioning earlier, reasonable expectation of privacy. If you find yourself within a public space, it depends on the context. If it is a public rally, and it's within a public space itself, and a photograph is taken, and you so happen to be within the picture itself, there is a reasonable expectation that you aren't asking for your right to privacy if you find yourself at a public rally. But I think context of the publication is also important, because there's a big difference between, I post a picture of a public rally and you just happen to be in the picture, or if I post a picture of you as an individual at the rally and I say, Devin Turner at the ANC rally, when you didn't even intend to. It could be that you were at the rally, but you weren't there necessarily in support. You just happened to be there, and you get posted as a poster child of sort within the rally itself. You could then reasonably ask that be taken down, or at least context be given that this just is a public rally, and you just happen to be there as well. So it still goes on to that, your right to privacy, but a reasonable expectation that if you're on the boundary of public and private, you can't have the same kind of expectations for privacy.
Also, just to mention on, sorry to jump in, but also just to mention on rallies, there is a recent case where actually someone was fired because they had, signed in and they told the employer that they were sick, and then next thing they were seen on TV at an EFF rally. And obviously they had to be dismissed because they lied. And obviously this was picked up because they did see them on TV, but also there was also a SARS element to it to say, but those two, like, you were not at work during that time. So those are also quite important. If you are going to a rally, rather say you're going to a rally and don't lie, because if something is public, they will definitely find out. Or also if you're taking sick leave, next thing you're posting content where you're at, shaking your booty in Dubai or in your yacht or whatever. So it's quite important that even when you are, asking permission to do something, make sure that it is the correct thing. Because if you are going to a holiday, for example, it should be vacation leave. Don't take sick leave and then you're like, no, I'm going to use my days for that. So I think that's also quite important to just bring into the conversation.
Just to go back on the rally, for example, let's say I am an EFF supporter and I go to the 10th year celebration rally, whatever. And I'm not aware that something is going to happen. For example, the song that was sung at the stadium and the video trended for quite a while. I think it actually still is. What happens now when I appear in that video where there's something that's wrong that's actually happening in the video, and because it's trending, my employer comes across that video and sees me part of the crowd singing that song. So now what happens? Can I get fired because of that?
I think it goes back to the relationship with the employer, the kind of values that you have. And I think it is quite important as well that if you are a strong political person, I mean, don't strip that away from you for the sake of a job. I think you need to be forthcoming about it. Your company, depending on whatever they want to say, about that content. If they want to take action, you can represent yourself or get somebody to represent you to say, but we're in a struggle song. Like it's, it might not amount to HB then. So I think it's that thing of you'd really have to defend your case. Space. It's difficult for me to say it's a yes, you'd be fired, or it's a no, you're fired. But I think if you are able to present your case in a way that will be able to advocate for why you actually were there, and bringing elements of, is it hate speech or not hate speech, and it's in your personal capacity, things like that. I think there's ways that you can obviously defend your matter and obviously defend yourself. So I think it will depend. So I think I'll just leave my answer at that. It depends.
Okay. So the last question is, what are the guidelines around sharing bad customer service and mentioning the name of an individual and or the organization they represent or work for on social media? What kind of proof do you need to back yourself up should this be turned against you?
Interesting. That's a really good question. You want to?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. I think that if you're an employee working within a company itself, first of all, you are allowed to disclose the fact that this person works for the company, especially if you have a working relationship with the person as a customer, like sales or representative. So, and even in disclosing the person's name, because I think that when you're within that sphere or space, it becomes more public in its nature, because it's not your interactions with that person within their personal capacity. It's your interactions with that person as an employee of company X. So you're allowed to disclose that. And I suppose in terms of complaining of conduct or bad service in that sense, I think it could form part of the, fair comment exception, where it's a fair comment that you make because in your opinion, what you have received is bad service. And you'll give evidence of the fact that you'll say, my product that I ordered came 2 months later than I expected it to. That is bad service. And then that's fair comment, right? You aren't defaming the reputation of the customer sales representative, and you aren't defaming the company if you reasonably expected your product to come in a week's time and it comes a week and a half's time. It's not defamatory, that is fair comment. In your opinion, that service was not sufficient. So you are then able to disclose the company that provided the service and also the sales representative that you worked with that you believe didn't provide sufficient service or acceptable service without violating their privacy or even defaming them in that sense.
And I also think, just to add, exhaust all your options. I think, people are so quick to go to social media before you even exhaust all your options. So I think if you've complained, you've got emails, you've made record of that, and you're still not getting any joy, I think only then I think it would be, I don't want to use the word acceptable, but I think it would be acceptable, for you now to say, I've exhausted all my options. Social media seems to be my only avenue. I've made these calls. This is who I've spoken to. I've complained to the manager. I've written emails, and they're still not forthcoming. I am going to take this on social media. And even if that's your last resort in terms of your last demand, to say, I'm resorting to social media now because you guys are not forthcoming, you're not helping me, I've paid for this, or I've done this, I've done that. So I think exhaust all your options before you just decide to name and shame people, without having taken the necessary steps. And also, I was attending a conference last week and with a bunch of regulators, and something that was actually mentioned is that people are so quick to complain on social media, but then when the regulators reach out and they try to sort out the matter, they see that oops, you're actually not, you were actually at fault. And an example that this lady made, I think she was from the National Consumer Protection Act board, but basically the people who are in charge of consumers. And what had happened was that a child was using her phone to play games, and they were downloading games and purchasing and obviously debiting from the credit card. And obviously her bill was like massive, and she didn't know like what had happened, and she was now complaining and say, oh my word, Vodacom doing this and doing that, only for her, you know, for them to realize once they've investigated that the child actually used the credit card to make purchases on the online game, and obviously that's how she's stepped up. So there's certain things, that's why I'm saying you need to exhaust all the options. It's quite important.
All right, thank you, Lerato and Devin. I don't see any other questions in the chat box, so I'll close the question and answer session. Thank you so much, colleagues, for a very engaging question and answer session. We'll now proceed with the lucky prize draw, where one of you will walk away with the 1,000 Rand Takealot voucher. Okay, so the winner is Mashudu Mulauzi, the business developer at Maboho Consulting. Congratulations, Mashudu. This Takealot voucher will be on its way to you shortly. Thank you so much, colleagues. A reminder before we end the session that our webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our website, www.percosa.co.za, and we will also send an email to all colleagues to tell them that the webinar has been uploaded. So colleagues, that brings us to the end of our webinar this morning. Thank you so much for attending, and thank you to our guest speakers, Lerato and Devin. Thank you so much, colleagues, for attending. Until the next one. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.